What's up, everybody? It's Goddess Z, and I'm back with another podcast episode on holistic and spiritual as fuck. Welcome back, fam. I appreciate each and every one of you. The podcast is growing. We've got more episodes. And if this is your first time joining the podcast, welcome to the podcast. We talk about all sorts of things here that pertain to that mind, body, spirit integration. So we talk about ancestral healing, shadow work, metaphysics, just all sorts of esoteric practices that can help you to integrate that mind, body, spirit connection. And this podcast now drops every Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. How are you guys liking that? Loving that? Please share that with me in the comments. And is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, and YouTube, and pretty much anywhere that podcasts are syndicated. On the first and third Friday of the month, I have a guest come in and they share their wisdom, their expertise, and tools and ways that you can actually start to incorporate these things in your life. And then on the second and the fourth Fridays, I am coming in with my downloads and my transmissions, which are coming fast and heavy now from the ancestors and my spirit team, just to offer you guys some more guidance and just a little bit more from me. That was actually what was called for from my ancestors. And everybody that knows me knows I'm an ancestor girly and I move when they say move. Okay. So this is going to be episode 59. Can y'all believe it? 59 already. We've been going now for 3 years and really cranking them out in the last year. And today we're going to actually be talking about activating your DNA from awakening to ascension. Okay. So a lot of times people, we hear spiritual awakening and then we also hear spiritual ascension. And people sometimes don't know the difference, and there's different signs and symptoms and levels to it. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So make sure you stick around and listen to this entire podcast and let me know, how it resonates with you as well. And then, of course, if you want to know more about me and how to find me, check out my website at holisticandspiritualaf.com. That'll be down in the description. There's all sorts of things over there. I offer spiritual consultations, books, classes, meditations. So definitely check me out over there as well as how to find me on social media. Okay. So I'm getting better about not putting so much stuff at the beginning and making sure that we can actually move into the meat of things. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into today's episode because it's loaded. It's a lot of information. Of course, I had to kind of compile my downloads and transmissions into notes so that it would flow seamlessly and make a lot more sense. And it kind of keeps me on track too, because I'll go off and start having more downloads and transmissions as well. Okay, so once again, this is going to be episode 59, activating your DNA from awakening to ascension. And this, we're going to be taking this from the ancestral remembrance and activating your divine feminine codes perspective, because that is what I'm called to do. And that is what it's going to be mainly about. However, once you start to hear what goes on in between this spiritual awakening versus spiritual ascension, it can be kind of applied across the board on your spiritual awakening. So, we're talking about spiritual awakening from the essence of remembering the bloodline. Okay. This is very, very important because I always tell people to connect with their own ancestors, connect with your bloodline ancestors first. Okay. It's important to understand that we have bloodline ancestors. And for some of us, we also have connections to certain star systems like Sirius or Atlantis, some ancient cosmic families as well. But my experience has been we don't skip steps. Okay, we do the work first, and that's why I always tell people to connect with their bloodline ancestors first, because their bloodline ancestors are going to be their first line of defense inside of the spirit realm. And as you begin to explore and grow and develop and transform and work your way towards that cosmic lineage as well. And what you'll find out, or at least my experience has been, is that my cosmic ancestors were always there as well. I used to call them high ascended masters. Um, and they've always been there. But who I worked with directly until I consciously knew what it is that I was interacting with was my bloodline ancestors. And even they were not. I didn't know who they were in the beginning. So I talk a lot about my personal story in the earlier podcast episodes where it was solo episodes. And I talk about, how I came from healing generational trauma, coming from a religious background like a lot of people who are awakening now. have come from, and they kind of like they don't know where to start, and that was kind of similar to me. But I think that once you begin your journey and you began to awaken and start to activate these things that are just laying dormant in your DNA, then you will be led to the right people, you'll be led to the right places, the right books, and you will begin to get what it is that you need to assist you on your spiritual journey and awakening. Now, the difference between religiosity and spirituality that sometimes gets people to run back to the church, and honestly, I haven't experienced that with any of the people that I've had the privilege of working with. They kind of stay on the path. They go through what it is that needs to be gone through, and a lot of times the difference between religion or church-based systems is you are in an environment where it is controlled and it is structured to the point where people are telling you, when to worship, when to pray, what book to read out of, and how to be and how to act, and there's a lot of dogma behind it, or and sometimes just a lot of doing what our family did, not really kind of making the experience our own. Whereas with spirituality and connecting with our ancestors is completely different, because it really is a lot about the work that you put in, and you are going to be having your own individual experience. One person's experience is not going to mimic another person's experience, and that's why it's called an experience. I always tell people that, like, a spiritual experience has to be experienced, okay? And so what ends up happening is you'll eventually hear something that somebody says and it'll resonate with you. You will be able to cut through the bullshit, okay? So you'll hear something, like I still do. When I listen to people and they're telling and they're teaching something, I listen very intently. I listen with my higher self and my soul. And if what they're saying resonates, it may not be that I understand it the way that they're saying, but I just know, then I will receive that. If it's something that feels off and I'm like, okay, that does not jive with me, then I don't take that. So that's what spirituality is about as well on your journey, is you are taking what relates and resonates with you and leaving the rest. Some of the stuff you just gonna leave there because it don't have anything to do with your purpose, your soul, your lineage, and some stuff you may come back around to as you begin to understand and grow. So it's really loaded, and this is just the spiritual experience that we're talking about right now, not the actual spiritual awakening. But I'm actually going to go through for both of these four different ways, four different levels, we'll say, or four tiers of the actual spiritual awakening as well as the spiritual ascension. And we're also going to talk about some signs and some symptoms, okay? And this was actually inspired by the last class that I had last month, where we had like some extra time, and it was very, the class was not like me just talking and teaching everybody things and then telling them to buy my stuff. It actually ended up being interactive. That's the word I was looking for. An interactive class where people got to start sharing things. And I told them at the beginning of the class, because of the type of class that it was, to be aware and conscious about the things that would be coming up from inside of them, because that's how it happens. That's how downloads happen. And a lot of times we'll miss them because we're just not tuned into the frequency. So at the beginning, we did an opening container, as they call it. Invocation, so to speak, and we called the ancestors in, and then of course I let them know, go ahead and pay attention to what it is that I'm saying as well as what's coming up for you. So we had this extra time and this extra space, and it became very interactive. And so people started talking about where they were on their journey, how certain things that I said helped them to resonate and remember certain other things. And then one person asked about a spiritual awakening, like, how do you know if you're on a spiritual awakening? And that's a loaded question. So I was like, ooh, that's a loaded question. So that is kind of what inspired this podcast episode, as well as a lot of what I do and the classes that I have is actually to help to be that bridge of where a person is and where they're trying to go. And I recognize, for me, being on the journey for 21 years, in the beginning, there was a lot of, oh my God, what do I do next? And I'm trying to hear my ancestors and I don't know what's going on. I can't tell what's my higher self, my lower self, my ancestors, cosmic family. It was frustrating. So I'm grateful to be in a space now where I can help so many people that are awakening in the collective consciousness, particularly women of the Afro Indigenous this bloodline to be able to activate the codes within inside of themselves, to be able to remember. It's very important from the perspective that I come from to understand that also I'm not the only special one out here, okay? There's a lot of us that are walking around, like I said, with our ancient codes laying dormant. So, my position and part of my purpose is to help to activate and shift the frequency in those who are ready, okay? So, if you landed on this podcast, that was not by accident. Either your ancestors wanted you here, your higher self was ready, or maybe it's just your time. So buckle up. Listen intently, get ready to activate some codes and shift your frequency, okay? And it's very important to understand that, like, once again, everybody's going to have different experiences behind this podcast episode. Some people may hop off, some people may listen to it later, whatever. My job is to put the info out there. So let's start with spiritual awakening and remembering the bloodline, okay? So, before the rising comes the remembering, okay? Awakening is when your soul and the souls of the women who came before you began to whisper, "Wake up, daughter, we've been waiting for you." And so I call that the call. Sometimes some of us have been hearing this, like something within inside of us has been nudging us to something more. There's something about to happen. You can just feel, we're, as divine feminine, we're very intuitive. We're very in tune with nature, the cosmos, and all there is, our family, our bloodline, our children. So deep within inside of yourself when nobody's around, something is calling you for something, right? Whether you connected to your ancestors or not. And so that's what we're talking about here is that beginning phases of that. The first thing is going to be the cracking open. This is like your ancestors knocking, right? Quietly. For some people loud, you never know. Some people ancestors may be very vocal, but you just have this innate intuitive feeling that something's going to change. And what this could actually look like is that you start to lose interest in things that you used to entertain. It's like your spirit no longer resonates with that. Now, this could be the job, this could be the partner, it could be friendships, it could be all sorts of things. You just feel like a major life change about something that was okay before is no longer fitting with your spirit. Okay, so you start to lose that interest, and you feel pulled to isolate, or maybe you start at this point to begin to start your studies, start checking out videos, you're looking on social media, things are resonating with you, you're receiving information that but you don't know it. And so this is the beginning of the kind of cracking open. And the more you do of this, the more of it you'll be called to, and your ancestors are actually kind of like, yeah, yeah, and they're going to be becoming more vocal, and they're going to start speaking to you in different types of ways, whether it be through other people saying exactly what it is that you need to hear, or whether you see a message somewhere that's like, I felt that in my spirit. That's that cracking open phase, okay? And so sometimes it can feel like a breakdown. Sometimes it can feel like your whole idea of what was once before your normal is no longer normal, and you don't know yet what direction you're moving into. So I will definitely say having a spiritual awakening is not for the weak. It's not like we do this in buddy systems and in groups. There's those of us out here who are on the path, but usually when we start our awakening, this is a very individual experience, and it's not something that you can necessarily bring your family in on. And for some people, they may have partners, and their partner may not be on what it is that they're on. So that could even be challenging. Now you having these feelings, these ideas, these thoughts, you're thinking about changing stuff that you've been doing for a while, and people are like, why you want to change that all of a sudden? And they just don't understand the inner call that's coming from you. That's that cracking open phase, okay? The second thing you might start to realize after that is the veil begins to lift. Now, all of a sudden, your ancestral memory returns. Okay. So now maybe you've gone to some classes, maybe you've done things like meditate. Okay. Because meditation is going to open up all sorts of things that you just you think of you sitting there being quiet. Really, it's shifting the frequency, baby. It is tuning you, and it's allowing you on a cellular frequency for your ancestrals to do that spiritual work that allows you to be more open to receive. Okay, so let's just say you meditate and maybe you're doing yoga, you're trying a little bit of everything, to sound healing, things like that, whatever resonates with you. Maybe being in nature, going on nature walks, and now you're starting to receive more messages and things like that. So now you get to a place where the second part is going to be that veil lifts. All right, and now the ancestral memory starts to return. Now you know it's something. It's not like, okay, I feel something's happening, like that beginning cracking open. This is like, okay, this must be my ancestors. This must be my spirit guides, however it's received to you. And in the beginning, for the longest, because I didn't have anybody around me that was talking about ancestors, and I came from the new age perspective first, they called it spirit guides over there. And I was rocking with that. All I knew is that from the time I was a child, I had a very close relationship with these um, spirit beings that didn't try to harm me, but actually kept me, as far as I'm concerned. That really helped me to get through my childhood and a lot of the stuff that I was going through. And they were my besties, and they were there for as long as I can remember. So I was like, oh, that must be my spirit guides. And that's how it resonated with me as I began my spiritual awakening. So for you, it may be spirit guides. For you, it may be straight up ancestors. The veil is a lot thinner now, for the entire planet, now that we're in the age of Aquarius. And that's an entire other podcast episode and class. So we won't go into all of that because it's deeper. And we're just going to stay on topic. So a lot more people are more aware, and we're coming back to our cultural practices, even though our families were pulled away from that and didn't talk to us about it. Now we have other resources and accessibility thanks to social media and the internet. So some people may say it's my ancestors, they know. For some people it may be a specific ancestor. Okay, it could be your grandmother, it could be a lost loved one that you knew, that you trusted, and they're the ones that are communicating with you in a way that only you would understand. So whatever it is, however it is for you, the veil is beginning to lift, and now you're starting to remember old ways. Okay, so now you're starting to remember your ancestors. It's not just like, oh, I wonder if the spirit guides. You're starting to remember things that they did, messages that they told you, practices that they had, and that they did, things around the house. You start to recognize a lot more of the untruths and the false reality that we're living in. You start to realize a lot of the colonial lies for what they were, because, like I said, for a lot of us Afro-Indigenous, particularly in America, we were pulled away from our culture. So I've got boomer parents, and they wasn't talking about this. They was doing their religious stuff, and nobody was talking about ancestry and stuff like that. But so I remember when I was awakening, I started out with my spiritual side first with the new age and meditation and yoga and spirit guides. And then I moved into a phase where I was being called to my African roots. At this point, my ancestors was like, okay, spirit guides is cool. We need you to connect with us. And so I started to connect with the community that really taught me about myself as an Indigenous woman. And I was shocked. I mean, just starting with melanin. I'll never forget that. I ended up watching What is Melanin by Laila Africa, Dr. Laila Africa. You can find that video on YouTube. Once again, it's What is Melanin? Okay. That changed my life. Okay. Because I had no idea. I had been existing for like 20 something years, and I had never knew that melanin was something beyond what pigments your skin, and how impactful and important it is in everything that has life. So at that point, I was off to the races. Then I really started going down the rabbit hole, and then I really started getting into metaphysics and seeing how that correlated back to us as indigenous people. And I was really floored by that because, like I said, I came from a new age perspective, and they were teaching me the best they could, but they didn't have the codes, baby. They did not have the codes. That's when I realized there was a lot of stuff that was being culturally appropriated. And I also realized that there was colonization and spirituality too. So, I started to recognize the colonial lies for what they were. Okay. So I think all of that is a part of the spiritual journey. And there was actually another podcast episode. I want to say it was episode 54, with Mama Goddess. So if you guys get a chance to check that out, we actually talk about that in there as well. So check that episode out as well. And so I think that's part of the spiritual awakening, is that there was the spiritual side, and the more that I opened and started to activate in my DNA as an indigenous woman, it was very important that I connected to my roots, my bloodline, who my specific soul is, the path that I took, and the portal that I came through. Okay, so that's why I always say connect with your bloodline ancestors first, because I came through a portal to get here. Okay, yes, I'm a soul, I'm an ancient one, but my mama, I came through her and I chose her. So I've got to pay reverence and respect to that lineage, based on how I was taught and what I know. So I had to reconnect with that. I had to really start to get that knowledge of self part two. So you may have that same experience, and the veil is lifted. You realize that every damn thing a lie. That's the veil being lifted. You realize, hey, wait a minute, I got to question everything. I've got to check into everything. Now you've got this intuition, and you also have these classes, these books. By this point, you have enough people to recognize that, hey, I'm not the only one out here doing this, and that there's people in different phases. There's people that know a lot and have been on the path 20 years. There's people just starting out. There's people in the middle of their shadow work and all of that stuff. And you don't feel so alone. You've got your tribe. So you're no longer trying to convince your family and stuff like that, which is almost always a bad idea. Leave them people alone, leave them people alone, and let them have their experience. Okay. Not everybody is meant to activate and remember. If you're the one in your family, you may be the one in your family. So you just have to do what it is that you're meant to do, that your soul has returned here to do. Um, so yeah, so you'll start recognizing the lies. And you may start to speak the language of your lineage through intuition. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean telepathic communication. I mean, those of us who are indigenous, and I don't care if you're from Africa, if you're from Native American, if you're Brazilian, if you're from Peru somewhere, every indigenous culture has they work with actively their spiritual gifts, and a lot of that was telepathic communication. So I had another episode, I think it was 40, where I talked about the five spiritual gifts or something like that. And one of the things we talked about, actually, I don't think I talked about telepathic, but that's how I communicated with my ancestors, right? As that little girl, I couldn't go just walking around talking to them like this, like I'm talking to you. And as a matter of fact, they taught me that, because when I was little, I would be playing with my dolls and stuff like that, and I would be talking to them. And I didn't realize I was talking to them, but I realized that, I know today that's what was going on. And I remember being out somewhere and talking to them. And I remember them telling me, they were like, you can't do that out in public because people won't understand. That's what they told me. And so they taught me how to talk to them telepathically. Now, at the time, I think I was like 7. I didn't know all of that, and I couldn't break that down and articulate it. But today I know exactly what it was. And I learned how to close my mouth and still hear them and them speak to me. And that's how I communicated with my ancestors. And I still do that. Sometimes I speak aloud to my ancestors in the house by myself. When I'm out and about, it's just that receiving those downloads, the information. So yeah, so you may start to talk to your ancestors by the time the veil is lifted, because you're no longer confused. You're starting to activate more inside of you, and you're trusting your intuition more. You're activating your gifts and your abilities, and you're believing it, because now you know that pretty much everything that was told to you in the life that you was living up to this point was a damn lie. So now at this point, you like, I'm finna trust this and see where it takes me. So that's a beautiful place to be. It's a lot better than the cracking open phase where you're kind of like, what the hell's happening? And the veil being lifted is it's exciting. It's a lot. So some of the symptoms as well, I forgot to talk about that. You may start to hear the ringing in the ears, the clear audience as you start to activate your gifts. Some people may have ancestral visitations, whether that be through dreams. And then you definitely have a hunger for the truth. We talked about that. You a seeker, you got to go find out what else they hide in, as well as ritual. How to do things, depending on where you are and where your bloodline comes from, you'll start to move in those different directions. That's why I always say that, because a lot of times we talk about it's October, yay, big ups to Hoodoo Heritage Month. And some of the things that have been going around about that is the fact that different ancestors practice hoodoo differently depending on the region that they were in. Same thing with indigenous people. They had some similarities in how they revered their ancestors, but a lot of different ways based on their culture. So it's the same thing if you have like New Orleans hoodoo versus South Carolina Gullah Geechee versus Mississippi hoodoo, Tennessee hoodoo, Memphis hoodoo. So those things are going to be very important. And so you may find yourself doing some things that resonate with your bloodline, and that's okay. There was a time when I started practicing hoodoo that I was a part of this group, and it was one of the coolest experiences that I've ever had. I'm actually thinking about putting something together like that in the future. You know, I've got, whatever things coming up. So there was a group of us as women, and we would have this assignment, like maybe working on candle magic, or it may have been a divination assignment with tarot cards, or whatever people were being led to work with. And to me, being in a group, it was much better because let's say we had to do candle ritual, and everybody would do their thing, and then we would all present it. We would put our pictures in there, and people would talk about what they used and why they used it. And the beautiful thing about it is everybody's was different, and everybody had different components and herbs and things that they put in there that still had the same functionality and properties. And it was so beautiful. And there was none of that competitiveness or jealousy. It was just really interesting to see how the different bloodlines and lineages did things. And everybody was being communicated by their ancestors and how to use stuff and what to use and things like that. So it was a really beautiful experience. And then we learned from each other too, so just keep that in mind. Like don't cut yourself short and cheat yourself on connecting with your bloodline lineage as you start to dive into this, because they're going to, like I said, they're going to teach you the way, y'all's ways. And I love that. Yapped enough about that. Let's go into 3, the call of the truth and liberation. Okay, so now you're going to start to reclaim your mother tongue of spirit. What does this look like? It looks like you talking to your spirit ancestors out loud. It looks like you know without a doubt that your ancestors exist. Okay, so this could be prayers aloud at your altar. This could be pouring libations and calling in and invoking them. It could be feeling the energy rise through your bones. I think anybody who's going to church and went to one of those churches where they, catch the Holy Spirit, you know what that feel like, the shivers, the chills, the the possession. I don't know about fully that far with some people, but you just never know. You start to be drawn to things, okay? One of the things that came out for me was herbs. Always wanted to be that girly. I did. I had friends that were into the herbal side of things. I was always on the healing side of things first. That's what I activated first. But they would know how to work the herbs and like how to heal the body and stuff like that. And I would be like, wow, that's so cool that they know all this stuff. And I ended up being drawn to herbs. Also prayer, but prayer in a different way. And that's one of the things that was very surprising for me, because I had ran away from prayer because I thought it was connected to religion, and I didn't realize that I just didn't know how to pray. So that was something that came back for me, but prayer in a different way. Um, and then also, let's see. Movement. Yeah, that's very good too. Moving that body, moving that stagnant energy, whether that's through drums, African dancing, whatever resonates with you. And this is all going to be a big part of you reclaiming what was yours, what was always ours, what was taken away from us, what was forgotten. And the thing is it was never taken away from us because it's in the blood, it's in the womb, it's in our soul, it's in our bloodline. Okay, so it could never be taken away. It just had to be quieted. Okay, so for our ancestors like the boomers and those like my grandmother born in the Jim Crow era, even though in the Jim Crow era they was getting down with hoodoo, but they weren't able to practice these things openly. They weren't able to remember these things openly. So now we are having that remembrance, and we are reclaiming, what was taken from them. There's a victory. There's a sense of victory about there. There's a sense of pride about that. Okay. So that call to truth and that liberation, baby, that freedom, and for me, I know with my ancestors, that's what it is. I'm living their wildest dreams for some of them. Some of them are older, clearly before the whole transatlantic slave trade, but a lot of them I still have connection to that went through the Jim Crow era and went through living life in this racist ass, colonial, patriarchal fucked up world that we're all in. So to see us remembering our roots and reconnecting to them is liberation and freedom. Okay. So definitely you'll be called to more things like that. You'll start to do more rituals. You'll know and you'll honor them. You will honor them. And there's a difference between honoring your ancestors and worshiping them. For anybody that this is all new to them, a lot of times people think that we're, praying to our ancestors. Our ancestors were people just like we were, we are. So we're not praying to them. Okay. That's a whole nother class as well. We won't get into that. Something else you may start to experience too is emotional purging, heightened sensitivity, spontaneous ancestral downloads. Those are just going to keep on coming. Once you open the portal to the downloads, they ain't going to stop. Okay. Tears of grief and tears of gratitude. Okay. You're going to start to feel them a lot more in and through you because they are in and in you. So for me, I think in the beginning the altar was very important in order for me to create that conscious connection and to be connected with them on a regular basis. But essentially, they're in me. They're, you know what I'm saying? They're everywhere that I go. So I still do some things, but I was instructed not too long ago. They were like, "Hey, that's not necessary. You're connected to us all day, every day. You are the altar. Embody it, live it, and be it." So I still do my practices and stuff like that. I still do offerings. From time to time, but um I don't do the altar practice as much as I used to in the beginning. And that's my walk and my journey. So it's not necessarily to say it's going to be for somebody else. So number 4, and this is going to be the last one for the awakening, the sensitivity of the soul. The womb is starting to awake now. What it looks like and it feels like is you begin to feel through the womb, not the mind. You start to feel from that ancient divine feminine place. Your body starts to speak. You have dreams, like everything. You are very sensitive now. Whereas before you were just like, what is that? You're waking up, you're cracking open, the veil is being lifted. And that's usually an education period where you start to learn a lot of stuff that you can't articulate. And then the call to truth, where you know this is what it is. You've experienced it. Now the spiritual awakening has turned into a spiritual experience, and you know this is what it is. You calling on your ancestors, you pouring libations, you're lighting candles, you're moving to the drums, and you're having these experiences. And then comes the fourth phase, which is the sensitivity to the soul. So now you're feeling every damn thing. Okay, you are in tune using your spiritual gifts. You're speaking telepathically, you're receiving downloads, you're cleansing, clearing, protecting, knowing when to move. You're strengthening that, you're developing that. You start to sense um which one of your spiritual gifts is more active. For most people, you start to feel the collective pain. That could be empathic, but whatever it is basically you're more conscious and aware to everything, not just on I can see it, I can touch it, I can feel it, I can hear it. You are also using your internal compass to start to break stuff down and decipher things, because you got to keep in mind you also have a more truth that has been activated. So now you don't just see things and hear things just for what it is because somebody said that and that's the way it's always been. No, you checking in. Does that make sense? Does that resonate with me? How does my spirit feel about that? So yes, very, very important place to be. And that's just part of it. you know and that part, once you get to the sensitivity of the soul and your womb starts to awaken and you start to function from this divine feminine powerful place that connects us as women who have the mitochondrial DNA, connects us to the collective consciousness. Okay, very powerful that is. Okay, now you start to feel things in ways that you probably couldn't even explain to other people. So this is definitely your ancestral remembrance, and it's the mother line, it's the bloodline, the maternal bloodline, because the ancestral bloodline goes through the mother, not the father. Okay, and that's very important as well, because once you start breaking down things, you understand that patriarchy tried to switch that and twist that around so that man can be all powerful and consistently keep woman down. And that's why a lot of times women, we take men's last names and things like that. But the bottom line is, just because you carry your daddy last name don't mean that the bloodline goes through your daddy. The bloodline goes through the mother, because the mother is the portal. She is the one who was that direct connection from the cosmos, bringing a soul into this dimension. Okay. Sorry, brothers. You had a hand in that, but what she does is absolutely powerful. And so, because of that, the bloodline goes through the mother. Now, that does not discount the patriarchal, excuse me, the patriarchal lineage, because that's very important as well. And so I work with both. I work with my mom's side and my dad's side, and they both have different functions. And they both work with me in different ways. So, but when we're talking the bloodline, we're talking about the mama. Like, for instance, I have two daughters. So my daughters, come through. I'm the next one in their bloodline. Their children, their mother will be the bloodline, and then I'm in the bloodline, that kind of thing. So, so yeah, very, very important. That's the power of the womb. All right. That was loaded. You know how I do. You know how I do. And if anybody has any questions, I really appreciate the questions, because it's inspiration and it also helps other people. So feel free to drop those down in the comment section. You can do that either on YouTube, or I believe Podbean, or anywhere really. So don't be afraid. Don't be shy. And like I said, make sure that you're following me on Holistic and Spiritual AF, because when I have classes, we really break it down. We dive in. And, depending on the type of class and the energy of the class, it's okay in my class to be interactive as long as you're not disruptive, which we never have those types of issues. We respect your questions. And then, of course, if you feel called to something deeper, like I said, I also offer spiritual consultations. I've got books and classes, so definitely check me out over there. And sign up for the newsletter as well so that you stay connected. So now, that being said, little shameless plug there. I be forgetting to do that. And my ancestors are like, you gotta let people know where the hell to get to you, okay? so so that's that. So now we're gonna move into the ascension phase. As you can see, the spiritual awakening is very loaded. And that's what I told sis when she came out with, what about a spiritual awakening? How do you know? I'm like, ooh, that's a big one, because depending on where you are on that phase of the journey, um, you know, there's gonna be it could be a whole lot of stuff. So that's very loaded. You're gonna have many spiritual awakenings. It doesn't make a difference. There's no such thing as like being too advanced to have another spiritual awakening. I'm having a spiritual awakening now. Okay, been having a spiritual awakening since June. Transformed tremendously, and then turned around. By the time I thought I was out, it's Saturn retrograde in Pisces, which is all about transformation and bringing shit to the surface. I was like, wow. So I'm having another one. But I'm moving through these a lot better and a lot differently, because I'm aware, I'm sensitive. I know when things are coming up. I'm not afraid of it. I know that transformation is elevation. So yeah, so let's talk about ascension. That's a good place to take it. Ascension, the rise of the divine feminine. Okay, so when the awakening, we talked about activating that DNA. We talked about connecting with the bloodline, remembrance from the blood that our ancestors carry, and how essential they are on our spiritual awakening, and can be to assist us. Now we're going to talk about the rise of the divine feminine. Okay, because you're hearing a lot about that as well, and there's a reason for that. Okay, that's a whole nother class. But if that resonates with you, drop a comment in the comment section, and I'll connect you to some people that you can start to really dive into that, because that is going to blow your mind. Okay, that's almost like when you were going through the veil being lifted and you finding out that wow, colonization lied about everything, and we was believing that shit. You're gonna really get your mind blown when it comes to the divine feminine as well. That's a whole nother awakening right there. So now we're talking about ascension and the rise of the divine feminine. This is going to be that remembrance that turns into embodiment. And that is where I'm at. pretty much, and it's continuing to happen for me. So I talked about the beginning of my journey was tremendous amount of healing. That was a big part of my purpose. I had to heal generational trauma. I had to go through shit first. Sometimes didn't think I was going to make it. Lots and lots of shadow work, multiple freaking dark nights of the soul, all while trying to figure out what the hell going on with me and connect with my ancestors. But I didn't quit. I kept going. And so I went through all of that. I continued to learn, I applied, I practiced, and I started helping other people. I started helping other people. Then I got to a point where I had fulfilled that part of my soul contract and I had completed karmic loops and cycles and things like that to the okay, now it's time for you to walk in this divine feminine embodiment, which is high priestess for me, high priestess and healer, amongst a lot of different things. And I don't say that to brag. I say that because all of that was in there, but I had to get through all of that stuff to get through that. Okay. And my ancestors was there every step of the way. So ascension is when the remembrance becomes embodiment. And I had another podcast episode where we talked about embodying your sovereignty. Okay. So now I'm no longer easily um, duped. I don't believe everything I hear and say. You could be talking to me, telling me one thing, and I'm going by my intuition and my ancestors to decipher and break down information. I'm receiving downloads about things that haven't happened yet. I'm having dreams out of the blue, and receiving insights. So now I'm starting to walk as this divine, feminine, sovereign being. And I'm embodying everything that I've learned, I've been taught, that I help other people with, and that continue to come up for me everywhere I go. Okay. Everywhere I go. This version of me that you see right here is the same version you'll see once I stop this recording. It's the same one you're going to get at work. And that probably pisses them off sometimes because they not playing them games with me, honey. Okay. They're not, because I know who I am. I know who I am and I know who you are too. And if it's not in alignment, you're just not doing just anything that you want to do with me. Okay. And so I embody that. And that's what ascension is. We're no longer just calling the ancestors, we walking with them. Dope, right? I love that. And I remember when that happened too, that they told me they was like, you got it. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to call on us for everything. You know what we know before you know it. So they was like, you got this. We're walking with you before. Now they were like, before when you were struggling and trying to make it through, we kind of guided you and carried you, but now we walking with you, boo. And that's how you start to move and elevate into that cosmic lineage. Okay. Now all of a sudden you start to remember not only your bloodline ancestors, but the ancient ones who you may not know their names, ones who you know that they are higher ascended. Okay. So yeah, that you walking with them, they everywhere you go. I was laughing about that today. Somebody once again picking on me at work, and I'm like, I don't know why y'all try it, because when you fucking with me, you fucking with them. Like, so we walk together, and I love that. You're no longer seeking divinity outside of yourself. You can breathe it through your womb, your voice, and your presence. You know what I'm saying? You can feel it. You using all of your abilities. You're using your ancient wisdom and your connection. You're really tapping into that divine feminine energy. So the first phase of that is going to be integration of shadow and light. Healing that mother bloodline, okay? And what that looks like, it looks like you stop running from your pain. Okay, I forgot to mention that during your spiritual awakening, and I better do this because it's not fair to not, is there's a tremendous amount of shadow work. There's a tremendous amount of deprogramming. There's a tremendous amount of lacking clarity and not knowing what's going to happen next. There's a tremendous amount of isolation for some. There's a lot that you're going to be going through as you continue to grow and transform. And so in the beginning, it's going to be rough. Somewhere by the time you get around to the fourth, you're going to know it's coming. You're going to know there's a shift coming and there's something changing, and I need to stay away from people and I need to do my spiritual stuff. And so you won't be running from it. And the same thing with ascension. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to integrate that shadow side of yourself with the light side of yourself. And this is how we start to heal the bloodline. You stop running from your pain. Instead, you listen to what the lesson is. Listen to what it teaches, okay? So we don't have to repeat karmic cycles and loops. We're no longer repeating the same stuff over and over like we did in the beginning because we trust, we know, and our experience has showed us that this was a lesson to teach us, to help us to grow. There's nothing bad happening to you because now you're sovereign and you're embodying what's going on in your life and all the tools that you have, so you listen to what it's going to teach you. You're releasing the shame that was carried from the mothers, the grandmothers, and great grandmothers. So you're starting to do that deep inner healing, right? Because you understand and know you've received the information in your blood. You know what I'm saying? Telepathically, you know. So you're releasing that shame. When we heal on that deep intercellular level, this is how we heal the bloodline. This is why the ancestors in the bloodline was so important because they are rooting for us. They're guiding us. They're helping us to be able to elevate and transcend spiritually. And as we do that, they do that. That's why they're so invested in it. That's why these are going to be some of the best cheerleaders you possibly could ever have. They want you to win. Now, and I'm not talking about all the ancestors because we know there were some people that were not good people on this earth, but by the time you've made it to this point, you know who your people are. Okay, so that's the important part about that is now we're not just doing this for ourselves, we're doing this for our future generations, but we're also doing it for the ones that came before us, the ones who made it possible for us to be able to live our life today and activate our divine feminine codes and connect with our cosmic family. Come on, baby. When you hear them talking about you are living your ancestors' wildest dreams, they ain't never lying. Some of them wish they could do this. I actually saw a video the other day where a guy was, it was a elder, and he lived when he was a little boy. His family was still picking cotton. They weren't necessarily enslaved, but they, right after slavery, that's all the jobs they could really get for some of them. And he tells his stories about that, and I'm listening, and he just has so much wisdom and so much power. And he talked about their state of being and how their connection to spirit was what kept them going. So we have that strength, with for those that had to go through that did the best they could to survive so that we could be here. We owe it to not just get our healing and keep it moving and being like, peace, thanks for the life. So that's why I'm so passionate about my ancestors because I know where I came from and I know how I got here. And that's what we're doing as divine feminines. We are healing that matriarchal lineage because as we do that, we elevate and raise the consciousness of the planet. Why? Because we carry the mitochondrial DNA, because we are the direct link. Come on now. Everybody can't do this. I need you to know how powerful you are, sis, okay? We are the direct link from the cosmos to this dimension. That's powerful. Ain't nobody ever told you that. Some of y'all probably knew that. But some of y'all, this is probably the first time you hearing this and you listening, you like, what? You're right. That is how powerful your womb is. That is how magnificent we are as divine feminine. So we're healing ourselves and we're also releasing shame, healing the mother bloodline. And this is really powerful. You start to forgive the women who couldn't protect you, knowing they did the best they could with the light they had. Okay. You got to recognize that some people were never able to heal their trauma, but you were, and you can also assist them. This may look like you stop resenting your mother and start to understand her wounds. And when we do that, I'm telling you, the entire bloodline exhales. And I know this personally. I went through this personally. I did not have a good relationship with my mother for a long time, okay, up until fairly recently. And as I had healed, like I talked about, when I got to a certain place where I broke a lot of, karmic cycles and loops, and I was moving over here into embodiment, that was probably one of the last things I did is I forgave my mother. I realized she did the best she could. I started to look at her differently and think about who knows what she went through. You know what I'm saying? Who knows what she went through that she never talks about that caused her to just have to survive, And I started to focus more on the things that she did do. how amazing she was to move us out of the projects of Detroit into upper middle class in another state that allowed me and afforded me so many different opportunities. And she did that by herself. I started looking at my mother differently. I started looking at her about her strength, about how her wisdom. Maybe her delivery was sometimes off, but she did the best she could. When I did that, that opened up a whole nother realm that I could have never possibly imagined. Okay. So if you're still struggling with the relationship with your mother, not everybody has a fucked up relationship with their mom, but if you are someone that is, that could give you some sort of cadence about where you are on your spiritual journey. Are you still in the awakening phase or are you on the ascension phase? And in order to get to the ascension phase and start to activate and embody that divine feminine, I'm going to let you know that's going to be one of the things that needs to be healed. It's no rush, it's on your time when you're ready. But in order to move into and embody an ascension level, we let go of things like that. We're not carrying resentments because we've healed. So, sudden forgiveness, it may come out that way. Emotional release, that's going to happen a lot throughout the whole thing. You may start crying. You may just be joyful. You may be so grateful. You just, oh my gosh, so grateful for your ancestors. You're so grateful for the journey, the things that you went through that you used to not be able to get over. Now, all of a sudden, you're grateful for it all because without it, you wouldn't be who you are today. You're grateful for the strength that you have. And, now you start to have these vivid dreams of family healing. What? And for those of us who are Afro Indigenous, particularly those of us in the Americas, we know that there's a tremendous amount of healing and wounds that is stored and riddled in our DNA and our families. So when we can start to see images of our family healing starting with us, that's a beautiful thing. And that's what we're doing here. That's what we're doing here. That's what this work is about. I'm going to keep it moving because you know how I get. So the second tier of an ascension is going to be a rise in frequency, returning to your sacred rhythm. Ooh, wee. What it looks and what it feels like. You may start to change your eating habits. Imagine that. You're going to start eating what nourishes you. This doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go vegan or plant based. You're going to do what feels right for you. But I will tell you this, whatever you start eating is going to have direct correlation with your cellular body structure and your ability to be able to receive different types of frequencies, downloads, and transmissions. You are going to be experiencing as you begin to elevate and raise your frequency, more interaction and encounters with your cosmic ancestors. And this is why I tell people to do this. I'm so glad that we're talking about this right now because I always tell people to connect with their bloodline ancestors. If you see any of my videos on TikTok, you don't ever hear me say connect with your cosmic lineage, right? So some people may think that I'm coming from a basic perspective, but as what I just described, there's a reason we're going in this order because high ascended masters are not effing with you while you still got all of this unhealed trauma and you don't like your mama and you mad about what happened to you when you was a kid. You got to heal that. That's where your bloodline come in because they were recently here. So they know what it was like. Your elevated, higher ascended cosmic family, some of them may have never even had a human life. So they are here for shifting of frequency codes and activating you to your divine frequency. Okay. So that's why you need them both. And there's no way that you're gonna skip steps, or you can try, but then you're out here and you're completely unprotected and unguarded. You don't know what the hell you're getting into. That's what I said. That's what I mean when I say that your ancestors are going to be your first line of defense in the spirit realm. Okay. So yeah. So, once you start to raise your frequency, now you're going to start connecting with your cosmic family. And then what you'll realize is they've been there the whole time too. They've been there the whole time too. You may change what you eat. You may start to move with the cosmos. Look at that. And all of a sudden, you paying attention to the moon. You listening to the earth. You connected to the trees. You connected with nature and all there is because you recognize it's all got melanin. How about that? It's all got melanin. You're grounding to the earth. You're starting to receive these higher frequency energies and information. And now the energy of your ancestors begins to dance through your aura. Somewhere around this point is like what I was talking about when my ancestors are like, you that's nice that you're doing the altar and everything, but really it's not necessary because you're constantly with us. You're constantly with us. We're with you constantly, and we're walking with you at this point. We're no longer carrying you. So that's a beautiful thing too, as you start to raise your frequency, as you start to step over the grid lines of the earth and these energy centers that are so powerful. This is ascension. Manifestations. Ooh, this is a good one. Manifestations start arriving faster. Ashe, ashe, ashe. Okay. And so does your peace. How about that? To come from shadow work, chaos, dysfunction, trauma, some of us, to experiencing peace. When I say you live in your ancestors' wildest dreams, some of them, that's what I mean. You have peace. You're able to draw and attract and magnetize things to you because you're raising your frequency. You no longer have that clutter and that static, in the way of the signal. So this is going to allow you to do that. And so you start to realize abundance as a lot of things, not just necessarily wealth, but abundance is peace, it's joy, it's good family relationships, it's your kids are healthy and okay, it's you have, peace of mind, you have a good relationship, you're happy. Those things are abundance. I used to think that abundance was always connected to money, and in the beginning. And no, I'm realizing that I'm very abundant and rich today, rich in spirit, and therefore my life reflects that on the outside as well. So something else you may experience is surges of energy, magnetic manifestations. We talked about that, and heightened attraction to nature and water. And water, yes, don't leave water out. Some of you guys are going to be really connected to water spirits as well. Once again, that working with your lineage, you will be drawn to certain things others won't be. Let's see, the third tier is going to be for ascension, embodiment of divine sovereignty. Talked about that in another episode. This is the return of the goddess within. Honey, you beyond know yourself. You not only know yourself as a indigenous woman, you know yourself as the soul. Okay, not just spirit talking to you. You know yourself as the soul. You're functioning from your higher self. And this is how you move around and interact with others in this dimension. And it doesn't mean that we're always like on, there's still levels and tiers and people. We got to interact with other people. Okay. So it's real easy to get pulled out of that. But the majority of the time, this is who we are. So what does this look like? You walk with your crown on, baby. It's invisible but undeniable. When you step up in the room, you change the frequency. Your attention, your presence demands attention. Okay, it don't even make a difference what you're wearing. It's how you carry yourself and the energy that's emanating from you and your light that is undeniable. Okay, you trust your intuition without needing proof. Okay, remember, because when we were going through the spiritual awakening and we was going into classes and stuff, we was running divination and we was using pendulums and stuff like that, we was figuring it out. Now that doesn't mean that sometimes I still don't use those things. I still do, but I trust my intuition. That's for sure. I used to kind of wrestle with that for a while, but not no more. Like I said, I've had enough lessons to be like, okay, it may not be what I want to hear, but it's the truth. You speak your truth with softness and power. You no longer need to yell to get your point across. Okay, you don't have to buck and up and go to war with everybody about what it is that I said do. No, why? Because your energy is shifts things, so you can talk soft but with power. And also, you may have to lay your foot down sometimes and let a person know that goddess does not mean punk. Please try it if you want to, because like I said, you effing with me, you effing with them, and now we got the bloodline and we got the warrior ancestors and the cosmic family. It's just not good. Like, don't even try it. Like, that's that's how it is at work. I be looking like I don't know why they keep on trying. And my job is to make sure that I keep myself out of karmic debt. So as long as I'm moving in soul alignment, if people coming after me, it's just not good for you because I'm highly protected, highly protected. Okay. You speak your truth. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, you don't need to yell, but you speak it with softness and power. You understand that saying no can also be sacred. No longer people pleasing, needing to be validated. You're the goddess. And you choose peace over proving your point. Sometimes it's okay to let people just be wrong as hell. Like, let them be wrong. You know what I'm saying? Keep your peace. You don't have to lose your peace trying to prove your point. That doesn't mean that sometimes we Don't slip into that. But when we do, we get the lesson, we get drained and all of those things. So yes, your presence is calm, it's vast, and it's commanding. Okay, you don't have a problem with boundaries. You set them. Your intuition is increased. Your aura is expanded. That people can see and feel your light, and clarity in your decision making. I find it very interesting that when I look at my older pictures, like on Facebook, because Facebook the only one that's got it. I should have never said that. Y'all gonna go look at. But when I look at my old pictures, I can see the transformation in me. Like I'll look at certain places, like, and I'll be like, "Ooh, I know exactly what was going on then. I was really struggling. I was going through the dark night of the soul during this time. Or, oh my God, this was one of the worst times of my life, or it felt like it." And then I could see like the shift, and I can see when I got to the top of my ascension phase, as the veil started being lifted on the planet for everybody. And so, man, it's a huge transformation in the way that I look physically, and you can just see the light and the glow just emanating. Whereas in some of my older photos, it was a heaviness around me, that I still had to kind of work my way through. But hey, baby, glad to be on this side. When I think about it, 21 years in the game, and I think it was all worth it. That's how I look at it now, because it was worth it. Even though there was some times when I wasn't sure, I didn't know what was going to happen. There was things that I thought was happening to me that were lessons that I needed to learn, cycles that I needed to break. All of it was necessary. And most importantly, it brought me to this side where I could be able to help other people who are also going through this, also kind of like, in different phases of that. All right, so now we're down to our fourth tier of ascension, which is going to be service of the soul, becoming the living ancestor. Come on now, come on, the living ancestor. What? You didn't know that? You are an ancestor return, baby. For those who are like finding it hard to connect with your ancestors, recognize you're an ancestor returned. You're an ancestor return too, who chose to come back through your very bloodline and lineage to do some work, to heal some generational trauma. And that's why I work with Indigenous women, because, like described earlier, there's a tremendous amount of trauma that's stored in our DNA, that has to be healed, that has to be corrected. And we're in a place now more than our ancestors have been in the last 400 years. Pre that, we was rocking it out too. Um, to be able to do that. So it's a beautiful time to be on the planet right now. It's a beautiful time for me to be where I am as this living ancestor, and being able to be of service to the divine feminine, helping to activate codes, just like was done for me, helping to raise the frequency so that they can tune in to who they've always been. And it's a way that I do that. And this has been, my ancestors have been calling me super heavy on this, like do it now. Like, what are you waiting on? And that's meditations. So I used to do live meditations on TikTok and YouTube, and I stopped for a while, for a couple of months, but I'm going to be offering that again, because it's important, and it's a big part of what I do, to be able, the healing work that I do and the energy work that I do, to be able to activate the codes, and as well as to elevate the frequency and on a cellular level for people, that allows their ancestors and spirit guides to work with them, shift things, tune things, and then you guys go off on your journey and do your thing. That is a big part of my service, and that's my ancestors like, get to it, stop talking about it, just do it, go ahead and start it again. So you'll be able to find more of that information as well on my website. I've got a few free meditations. I've got some on my YouTube channel that you can check out. You got to go to the live part of my YouTube channel to check that out. And then I'm also on Insight Timer. So I have a few on there, and I've got another one that I've got to put out, coming up too. So, like I said, check me out down in the description. Make sure you're following me, sign up for the newsletter, and you'll get all those communications. So the fourth and final tier of ascension is the service of the soul, becoming the living ancestor, baby. You begin to share the medicine. So now all of a sudden you have gone through this awakening, you've gone through, the shadow work, you've integrated it, you know who you are, you walking as a goddess, you the living ancestor. What else is there left to do? Especially once you have started to heal your family just by you healing. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. That's why you don't go running telling your family, which it is very tempting to do in the beginning. I'm not going to act like I ain't do that. All that does is cause arguments. Just know you're dealing with very unhealed people who's got a lot of trauma and you pissing them off. So it's going to be arguments, and you're dealing with, us. And so somebody got something to say. So the what I learned, and I learned the hard way, just like a lot of people, is that when I began to heal myself, that as a byproduct healed other people. As I began to shift my frequency and people started to see the peace and see the shift in my aura, then it was like, okay, whatever she was doing back then actually worked. So let your example be the example. Let your experience be the example. And let them people be who they are and live their life. So you begin to share this medicine. How is this going to show up for you in whatever ways that things were activated for you? Okay, so it could be art, it could be singing, it could be music, it could be healing, it could be divination, it could be through the herbs, it could be just your presence. Like I said, your presence and being of peace can be enough to calm and shift the energy in a room. Your existence now has become a prayer for those yet to come. Ooh, come on now, because you're a living ancestor. You're a living ancestor. You have children. Your children may not have had their children yet. Now you're part of the bloodline. You know what I'm saying? So now you're able to be somewhere actively in the bloodline where the shift happened. Okay, where there was all this trauma, this dysfunction, somebody had to change it. You answered the call. You didn't run back to church. You answered the call, and now you've embodied this thing, and now your children have seen a different way, and their grandchildren or your grandchildren and their grandchildren won't know nothing about what used to happen. The only thing you can do is to share the stories as the elder, to let them know where we came from and what we overcame and who our people were, and that we're strong and we're resilient and we're more than that story. So that's the beautiful part about that. You begin to share your medicine, and your existence becomes a prayer for those yet to come. And you understand that to serve is to embody love itself. And I think by the time you get to this place of ascension, you only want to do that, especially like I said, 21 years. I didn't just get here like 6 months ago. I didn't take a class. No, I had to go through it. I had to go through the fire. So I know that pain. I know what it feels like to be hurt and depressed and, having PTSD and all of these different things. I know what that's like. So to be able to get out and get on the other side, I only want to be able to help people so that they can do what? Take it back to their family and help people. Each one teach one. So for me, every time I teach, my ancestors are like, cheesing. They like, yes, girl. Like, they like, this is who we knew you was. And I love that. And so like, even with this, yeah, I have my notes, but there's a tremendous amount of downloads and transmissions that have been coming through, and the words that I say will activate people in different ways. The right people who are meant to listen to this episode and listen to it all the way to the end will do so. And that's just how it works. I don't go chasing, I magnetize. And I don't do this for clout or content or any of the other things. Yeah, I'm on social media. Why? Because people need to know that I'm out there, but I don't chase trends, and I don't, get caught up in answering the call of the algorithm. I answer the call of spirit and the ancestors, and I stay rooted. Why? Because I embody sovereignty as a divine feminine. I know who I am. You're not going to sway me and get me back in the matrix and trick me with this, and that. Why? Because I continue to maintain my spiritual practices, because I continue to do spiritual protection. Like all of those things that was going down in the beginning of the spiritual awakening, I'm still doing that. You know what I'm saying? Like, except for maybe the altar, but like the maintenance, the spiritual maintenance, that don't never quit. I still have to take myself to nature. Like when I hear that, and my ancestors will give me signals and downloads, like the meditation thing, they've been coming very heavy with that. Like, you gotta do it. And then something else I've been hearing is you got to get back in nature, which I'm like, yeah, it's been a while. And it's rained the last couple of times that I was going to go, but I need to go. You know why? Because there may be something that I can only get that way. So it's a beautiful, beautiful experience, but there is a difference between spiritual awakening and ascension. So as you can see, awakening, we're going to have many of those. along the way. And an ascension is when we have elevated our frequency to a certain level. We've healed and broken karmic cycles and debts, and we're embodying now. And that's what we mean by embodying. We live this, you know. Are we running the classes as much as we used to in the beginning? Probably not. You know, you're probably, getting some downloads, some information, reading some books, may check somebody out, but it's not like in the beginning where you're learning a little bit of everything to kind of see where you fit in the mix. At this point of ascension, you know who you are. So that was, loaded as usual. Hopefully, you guys got some value out of that because that's what it's all about is actually helping people. I do want to take a quick run through before we hop out of here of everything we just talked about. The entire sacred journey of awakening to ascension and versus ascension. So the first step that we talked about in awakening was going to be that cracking open, that something happening, something shifting. What is that? That releasing what no longer serves you. It's kind of a disruption to your life. I'm not gonna lie, because you're like, wait a minute, I thought I had it all figured out. Now all of a sudden everything's changing, relationships, jobs, things like that. The second part is going to be that veil lifts. Your memories of your lineage is starting to return now. You start to have awareness of the programming. Hey, wait a minute, that's a lie. That's a lie. Wait a minute, all this shit is a lie. You start having that revelation. Everybody goes through this. I've had several people on the podcast that tell their story, and everybody's a similar. The third is going to be that call to truth. Your ancestors are reclaiming their voice now. Now you can hear them more. You're connecting to them in applicable ways through rituals, through altars, through prayer. You're speaking their name. You're not afraid. You're liberating them and yourself when you do that. Fourth is going to be that sensitivity to the soul. You're now starting to be, you're not just thinking about your head, what your head thinks. You're going by your heart. You're going by your intuition, what your downloads you're receiving, what connection transmissions you're getting. All of this is starting to be integrated now. All throughout the process of awakening, you're experiencing shadow work because it has to happen. You, especially as you start to deprogram, now all of a sudden you're recognizing things about yourself that have been blocking you from ascending to this higher level. So you're going to be going through that the entire time of the awakening. Also important to know that there's many different awakenings that you'll have over the process of your awakening. It's not a one and done. Ascension, the first thing you're going to be doing there is integrating that shadow part with your light. Okay, lessons still come up, but you don't run from them, and you integrate it. Okay, what is this supposed to be teaching me? Like, what's the lesson behind this? It's not nearly as heavy as it was in the beginning with some spiritual awakening stuff. And each as you continue to go and grow, it does tend to lighten up because you know what's going on. It's different. Like when you don't, it's like getting hit with a truck. You don't know what the hell happened. Why did this happen to me? You just sit there like, why did it have to happen like that? So it's not like that anymore once you get to be continue on the journey, if that gives somebody some hope. Second phase of the ascension is going to be the raising of your frequency. The ancestors dance in your aura. Okay, you're raising your frequency now. You started to be vibrationally expansive. You are, just definitely in the flow of things. And then the third is going to be embodying your sovereignty, your goddesshood. Like I said, you step up in the room, you shift the frequency. You don't have a problem with boundaries. You know how to tell people no. You are walking with authority and who you are. And then the last one is the service of the soul. Now you start to become the elder spirit. And I think I talked about this in the last one. My ancestors told me that about, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago. They was like, "This is great. Now you're going to elder training." I was like, "Damn." I was like, "Wow, okay." So the shit ain't never done. It continues to go and grow. And you know what? I'm here for it because I'm honored. That's where I'm at today. Is I'm very honored to be able to do this for my ancestors and for my children and my children's children. As well as, and I'm grateful to be this age, even though I am going to elder training, still embodying my divine feminine. Activated, having activated codes and continuing to activate codes, finding so much more about myself on a soul level. Me being ancient and all that good stuff. Beautiful, beautiful experience, y'all. Do not cheat yourself on this. So yeah. So in closing, I just, I want to say that particularly once again to my Afro Indigenous women. I just cannot stress to you enough how magnificent and amazing you are, carrying the matriarchal lineage of the planet, girl. You know what I'm saying? And it's a beautiful journey. And it kind of gives you a little bit of peace and solace too, to know why is it that everybody is so against black women. I've tried to avoid using that word black because it's a code and it diminishes who and what we truly are. But as indigenous women, you start to greatly have an understanding now once you start tapping into your divinity and your divine feminine. So, with that being said, like I said, y'all got some comments, y'all got some questions, drop them down in the chat, please. And that is going to be it for this episode. Until the next episode, y'all. Peace.